Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Amy and I'm a full-time traveler. Almost exactly a year ago, I had the privilege to embark on one of the most incredible experiences of my entire life. I got to go gorilla trekking in Uganda. And what's even more crazy is the fact that it's one in 3 countries you can do it in the entire world. This is going to be a full guide, so I'm going to break down a few key factors, including transportation, getting there, accommodation, the overall cost, the experience in general, so you have a good idea of what to expect when gorilla trekking. So let's get started. As I mentioned, there are only 3 places in the entire world to trek to see the silverback gorillas. You can do it in the DRC, Rwanda, or Uganda. And there are a few different factors to keep in mind when booking this experience, and I think most importantly, it comes down to safety and price. So here's a little breakdown of the comparison between safety, price, and other factors to keep in mind. I ended up choosing Uganda because I was actually volunteering near Kampala, which is the capital, so it made the most sense to do it from there. While I can't touch on the experience in Rwanda or the DRC personally, I do have a friend that went in Rwanda and loved it there. So when it comes down to it, I think I made the right choice with going with Uganda when it came to my budget and safety concerns. Before you do anything, you need to book your permit. Before you book the permit, you need to choose which sector you want to trek in because the entire park of Bwindi Impenetrable Forest is quite large, and that means you have to narrow down where you actually want to do the trek. The easiest way to book the permit is through an agency that does the booking on your behalf. I think you can do it on your own, but I personally would not recommend doing it because that seems a lot trickier and you might not actually get the date that you want and there could be some complications, but with an agency you pay a small fee and they handle all of that for you. So how do you find these agencies? I found mine through scouring through all the Facebook groups and asking people who had been trekking in Uganda before or were going to and had booked agencies for their permit. And I ended up finding Africa Adventure Vacations. I was a little skeptical at first, of course, because you don't really know what's going to happen, especially when you're booking things in Africa, but they were incredibly professional and I would definitely recommend using them if you are doing this experience yourself. Although I was traveling by myself, I made the decision to meet up with someone from one of these Facebook groups who was also going to be in Uganda at the time, a really lovely French girl, and she suggested the Ruhija sector, so that is the sector that we chose. If you're wondering about the cost, the permit in Uganda costs $750 US plus an additional $50 for their service fee as the agency. And once you confirm a date, then you make the payment and they request your passport information so that they can complete the booking. And if you're going to do this experience, I would suggest booking it at least a few weeks ahead of time. You should only choose the accommodation that you want to stay in while you're there once you've booked the permit and you know which sector you're going to be in, because as I mentioned, the park is huge, so if you book one sector and you have accommodation in another sector, it's going to be a nightmare trying to get there. I was booking my accommodation pretty last minute, so there weren't very many options out there, but I found mine on booking.com and I stayed at Ruhija Gorilla Friends, something along those lines. A room there cost about $30 US a night, but you also have the option to do camping, and if you're staying in a tent, it's typically a little bit cheaper. You should also note that there isn't much surrounding these different gorilla camps within the forest, so because of that, you have to buy all of your food on site, and because there are no options around, they up the price, so that's something to keep in mind when it comes to budget. There are a few different ways that you can get to the park, and I will tell you up front that none of them are cheap or easy to do. If you're flying in and out of Kampala, then you can organize a shuttle through your accommodation or a private driver, and every time I asked around, I was quoted about $800 US, which is a lot for a 7 to 8 hour drive. I personally was volunteering just outside of Kampala in a little village called Jinja, and my volunteer organization actually drove me to the forest and then back to the airport after, and I paid them a definitely discounted fee of $400 US. It's a long drive and it's pretty good for the most part, but once you get to the actual forest and you have to drive through the forest to get to the camp, which is usually about 30 to 60 minutes long, it is really bad conditions and you need to have a good car to get through. Of course, you have the option to fly into closer airports, some of which are in Rwanda or within Uganda, but then you have to consider the price of those flights and play around with the numbers. You might be able to find a cheap flight there and then the drive will be much shorter, so that could work out. But once again, I was booking all of this last minute, so I didn't have that luxury. I honestly had no idea what to bring with me or what to be prepared for when going into this trek, and I didn't have a lot of options with me because I was traveling with a 45-liter backpack only. It's recommended to bring lots of layers because the weather is constantly changing in this forest. That also means you should definitely bring a raincoat because it's likely going to rain. Hiking boots would be ideal if you have them. However, I was not prepared for this trek and only booked it last minute, as I said, so I only had standard running shoes and they were just fine for me. But the weather was good and we didn't have much mud or anything, so I lucked out. But if you're going in a rainy season, then bring the hiking boots, trust me. You should also come prepared with a few liters of water, lunch, snacks, and probably some bug spray. On the day of the experience, you need to meet at the entrance of that sector of the park at 7:30 a.m. That's when you sign in, show your permit and your passport, and wait around for other people to get there. As you wait for the day to start, the local people from the community put on a dance and a little show and try to get some tips while you're waiting around, and then the rangers explain how the rest of the day is going to go. At the time of my experience in June of 2022, Bwindi Impenetrable Forest was home to 459 gorillas, half of which were used for tourism and research, and the other half were left in the wilds. And at the time, there was a total of 1,062 gorillas worldwide, which means that Uganda was home to nearly half of all of the gorillas. So as you're preparing for the trek, you learn a lot about these gorillas and you find out that gorillas and humans share 98.4% of DNA, which is pretty crazy if you ask me. So they tell you this information so that you understand why you need to wear masks throughout the trek when you come in, when you get to see the gorillas, because you don't want to transfer any disease that you might have because their DNA is so similar to ours. You also end up learning a lot about how gorillas interact with each other and where to find them throughout the forest. Because Bwindi Impenetrable Forest is an impenetrable forest, you need machete to get through and cut down branches when you're trekking. As the trekker, you don't need to worry about this, but the rangers will have machetes with them so that they can chop down any big branches that are getting in the way. You also learn before you start the trek that early in the morning there are trackers that go out to find these families of gorillas and have a good idea of where they are and how they're moving throughout the day. This is done to give you a better chance of actually seeing them and finding the family within a shorter amount of time. So after you go through all of that information, the actual trek starts at 8:30 in the morning. Each group has a max of 8 people allowed to be in it, and you stay with the gorillas for 1 hour only. This is because we don't want the gorilla families to have too much human interaction per day, so there's a 1 hour cap for all gorilla families. As you head out with your group, there are 2 rangers that follow at the start and the back of the group, and they have firearms with them in case you encounter any wild elephants. I had no idea that elephants could be so dangerous, but because they aren't habituated and aren't used to seeing humans, they can be quite aggressive, so if there's a chance of seeing them, you have to be prepared. During the trek, you also have the option to use a porter, which is someone from the local community that will carry your bags, your food, whatever you have with you, and help you if you're trekking down steep hills and need a hand. They charge $15 for the day, and I personally didn't use one because I only had one bag with me and I didn't feel like I needed any help with the trek. The big question when it comes to the trek is how long is it and how long will it really take you to find these gorillas? Unfortunately, no one can give you a set time, which is so frustrating because you have no idea if you'll be trekking the whole day or if you're going to be trekking for 5 minutes. This was especially stressful when I was doing the trek because I had to drive 7 or 8 hours back to Kampala the same day to make it in time for my flight. We got super lucky and we found our gorilla family within 20 or 25 minutes of trekking, which was perfect. When I actually got to see the gorilla family up close, it was a surreal experience. The hour honestly flies by as you're just watching each member of the gorilla family move around, like pick at each other's hairs, and they might actually start to move, which means you'll have to follow them a little bit. And our gorilla family was so cool because they were sitting quite close and then they passed right in front of me, and you do have to maintain, I think, a 2-meter distance between them at all times, but obviously you can't predict if there's going to be a moment where they cut right in front of you. So you have to be careful and just remain calm, and while you can talk with people in your group, you have to keep it really quiet and whisper so you don't spook them. Also, if you're in a situation where the gorillas are getting too close, the rangers will step in and make sure you're fine. But the number one thing to remember is if they do start to come quickly towards you, to remain calm and move slowly. The one regret I have from this experience is not having a better camera lens because I couldn't zoom in well enough on my own camera, but luckily the girl I was traveling with, or that I just met for this experience, had a really good lens and she sent me some of her photos, which was amazing. And I honestly just felt like I was Jane and Tarzan when I was there amongst the gorillas, just soaking it all in, and it was such a cool once-in-a-lifetime experience. And then just like that, it was over. So when it comes down to the cost, you're pretty much looking at spending an absolute minimum of $1,300 US for the permit, accommodation, food, and transportation when it comes to seeing these gorillas. So all of that for 1 hour of gorilla time. Do you think it's worth it? I'm not gonna lie, while I thought it was an incredible and insane experience, I don't think I would do it again simply because of the cost. However, the fee that you're paying for the permit does go to repopulating these gorillas and getting them out of a possible extinction, so having a direct impact on that is pretty incredible. If I were to do it again, I would definitely try to come in through a different airport so I wouldn't have to do that long drive, but I still had a great time and it's something I'll never forget. So that's everything you need to know about gorilla trekking in Uganda. I'll leave links for booking the permit and anything else that you might need when doing this experience in the description box below, and make sure to leave a comment if you've been or if you have any other questions for me. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video, and I will see you next Wednesday for a new one. Bye!